Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the webinar talking about iPad and tablet training with our presenter, Susan Brooks-Young. Susan, are you there?
I am. Good morning, Ernie. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great. Thank you. A couple things real quick before we get started. Susan will have some questions that pop up, and there's a question area, and there's also a chat window. So either one of those, if you have some general questions in the chat window, and then the questions you could also answer, and we'll try to get to some of those at the end. And we'll also get through some other aspects of the presentation at the very end, some additional resources, so be prepared for that. But I would like to introduce Susan Brooks-Young. Again, this is Ernie Delgado. I am the founder and the co-CEO of Beyond Technology. We've been very fortunate over the many, many years we've been doing this of knowing and working with Susan Brooks-Young, who is quite up to the task of presenting this webinar because she's been involved with technology and education for many years. I'll let her get into all of that. And she's really coming from a very good place of not just teaching but being an administrator, and now she's a speaker, and she's been recruited all over the world for her knowledge. So Susan, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you, and I'll let you take over from there and introduce yourself to the group and let you start your presentation.
Okay, terrific. Thanks a lot, Ernie. I'm going to go ahead and grab the screen and get my presentation going here. I'd like to welcome everybody and thank you for being here with us today. What we're going to be talking about is 5 ways that you can use iPads and Android tablets to supercharge classroom activities during this school year. And during the course of this webinar, which is going to run not terribly long, about 30 minutes or so, there are 3 general topics that we're going to be covering over this time. We're going to be talking about apps for productivity, we're going to be talking about apps for education, and then we're going to be talking about creating content. And by that, what I mean is looking at ways to use some of the various capabilities of the tablets, such as the cameras, the built-in microphones, and some other capabilities that are available to owners of tablets. Before we do that, you may be wondering, why am I the one who's qualified to be doing this particular webinar? I actually started working with handheld technologies in classrooms back when the iPod Classic was bleeding edge, and at that time was working with teachers who were creating various kinds of content, primarily audio and video, that they were using on the classics. But since that time, I've been engaged in working with touch technologies as they became available and as they have morphed and gotten more sophisticated over time. So we're looking at a fairly long time of working with this equipment in what overall is actually a very short period of time that the technology has even existed. But having said that, then we'll go ahead and move on, and what I'm going to share with you today is a lot of what I've learned about working with the touch technologies. This time when I talk about background, it's not my own background, it's actually looking at some instructional information that's important to be keeping in mind when you're working with any kind of technology in the classroom. I'd like to remind you briefly about Bloom's revised taxonomy. Bloom's taxonomy was originally developed back in the 1950s by a psychologist or psychiatrist and a group of graduate students. And what Benjamin Bloom was looking for at the time was ways to make intentional decisions about when and how children used critical thinking skills in the classroom. And the taxonomy stood for about 50 years. Then in the mid to late 1990s, one of Bloom's students pulled together a group and said, you know, things have changed, and we really do need to look at the taxonomy again, and we really do need to see if it still reflects the best thinking about critical thinking. And so they went back. They spent nearly a decade working on what the taxonomy should reflect in the modern world. And they actually came up with two primary changes that are really important for you to keep in mind. The first one is they changed the names of the levels from nouns to verbs. So instead of talking about knowledge, they now talk about remembering. The second thing that was really important is that they flipped the top two levels of the taxonomy. Back in the day, thinking was that to take something that someone else had created and do an in-depth evaluation of that was the highest order thinking skill of all of them. But today, what we recognize is that while evaluating is very important, and it is indeed the second from the top in terms of where it falls on the taxonomy today, in reality, the critical thinking skill that challenges students the most is that of creating. And that's important when it comes to using any kind of technology in the classroom with students, because if you stop and think about the kinds of activities that are normally used and supported through the use of technology, what you most often see are activities where kids are asked to remember something. They do drill and practice, or they feed back answers on something, or they hit the understanding level where teachers say, I'd like you to blog about what you learned today, or I'd like you to write a paper about XYZ. We really are seldom asking students to do anything with the technology that goes beyond the first two, maybe three levels of the taxonomy. So everything that I talk about once I get to the creating content part of the webinar today is really talking about in terms of getting the kids working at those evaluating and creating levels more often.
Susan, may I ask you a question real quick before you move on from that? Now, do you feel that this is why the Common Core is becoming such a major emphasis, and why technology, along with Common Core, is really evolving to the next level and becoming such a major issue in our classrooms around the country?
I think that's part of it. Certainly that's not all of it, but I know that the developers of Common Core, and of course at this point it's only covering language arts and mathematics, but the developers of Common Core really did want to bring higher order thinking skills back into play, because we really have not devoted as much time to them as we should have been doing. And so definitely that's been a thrust in the development of Common Core. And it's part of, I think, why Common Core seems to be such a huge thing right now in classrooms.
It is. It's a major issue with most schools today, preparing for that. Okay, I'm sorry to interject. Go ahead, move on. I just wanted to see how the two connected with each other.
Absolutely, they definitely do. They definitely do. So what we're going to start off with before we move into the content creation piece is one of the reasons that tablets are as enticing as they are is because of the apps that are available and the capability that they have of running various kinds of apps. And I don't want to discount the value of these, even though I do want you to recognize that most of these apps end up having you work at those lower three levels of the taxonomy, okay? What's happened over time has been that there are more similarities than there are differences between iOS somethings and Android somethings. And because there is now more of this commonality, it's a whole lot easier to develop activities and to use these devices to support a lot of the regular kinds of tasks that we would be doing anyway, but it's more convenient, it's easier, it's whatever, to do it with the tablets. The issue is that we need to be sure that when we're selecting these apps that we're making some conscious decisions about why we're picking one app over another. And I don't see, in many schools, I don't see a lot of thought being put into app selection at this point. So you'll see in the productivity arena, you want things that facilitate administrative tasks. You'll often see apps like Evernote or CloudOn, which is a application suite that allows you to deal with Microsoft Office documents on a tablet. Or you'll see Dropbox, which is a cloud storage app that allows you to more easily move document files from your iPad or your Android tablet to a computer or to another device. But you might see in the same environment 4 different people using 4 different cloud storage devices or apps, or 4 different office suites, whatever. And this can get to be very confusing if you don't have some continuity. And I'm not going to go into a lengthy thing about standardization, because I'm not a 100% fan of that. But what I am a fan of is making conscious decisions so that if I want to share something with the teacher next door, I'm able to do that without too much difficulty. And so really stopping and thinking and talking about what is it you're using and why is it you're using it, and how is it making your life a lot easier. The second thing then that goes along with the discussion about productivity apps is there needs to be a serious discussion about how apps are used for supporting instructional activities. And what I am seeing happen an awful lot right now in many schools is something that I call Carmen Sandiego syndrome. And Ernie, you're way too young to remember this. It was probably done to you.
I know Carmen Sandiego very well.
But I'll bet you were a user rather than a teacher, getting somebody else to use it. I, on the other hand, was a teacher. And basically what happened was that back in the day, there were very few really good educational software programs to use in classrooms. So once you had gone through Oregon Trail and you had gone through Odell Lake and you had used Lemonade Stand, you had pretty much exhausted all the possibilities. And then Carmen Sandiego was released. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? It came from Broderbund Software. It had color graphics, which were revolutionary at the time. It came with a great big thick book that the kids could use to look up the answers to the clues that were given in the software. And the idea was that you would use this program to gather clues and chase Carmen and her nefarious gang of international spies all around the world. And it was really a fun, engaging activity. The problem with it was that, at least in California where I was teaching at the time, where it really probably fit into the curriculum was 6th grade social studies, because that was when we were studying world history. Unfortunately, I was teaching 4th grade at the time, and what I and all my colleagues did was, even though world geography had nothing to do with what we were teaching, we all figured out ways to have our students play, because that's basically what it was, play Carmen Sandiego. And that is problematic. And I see the same thing happening now with apps. Teachers are, rather than making decisions about the apps that they're going to use based on the curriculum, they're making decisions about the apps they're going to use based on how much fun they are, how engaging they are, and whether or not they can somehow twist what they're doing in the classroom to support use of that particular app. And I empathize, I understand. There are a lot of subpar apps that are out there, but it's really critical if we're going to use these devices and if we're going to show that their use really makes an impact on student achievement, what we have to do is rein ourselves in, and we have to be sure that when we do select apps for use in the classroom, that those apps have a clear tie to the curriculum, that they meet predetermined criteria, and that they really are supporting the instruction that we need to provide. And I have here on the slide just a few examples of education apps that do meet that. But what I'm going to suggest to listeners today is that you need to have rubrics. You need to, as an organization, you need to come up with an app selection procedure that's not onerous. It should not take 6 months to get an app put on a device. It should take about 6 minutes or some happy medium in there somewhere. But there should be a procedure where when a teacher is considering using an app in the classroom, the teacher walks through the app, has a rubric or a checklist that helps him or her keep their thinking focused on what's going to be best instructionally for the students, and that there's always a very clear tie to what's being taught.
Susan, I think it's important. If I could point out something real quick, because I know from talking to you and watching some of the courses you've developed, there's really a distinction between apps for productivity and what you're calling the more game-type apps. And you're not saying that productivity can't be fun. You're just saying productivity is more of a project-based tool, whereas the apps that are more maybe subject or grade-specific, you could just app yourself to death. Your budget could be right out the window if you focus on a more app-driven versus productivity-driven approach, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And do your students a real disservice in the meantime. So what I'd like to do before we move on is I'd like to ask the participants in the webinar to think for just a moment about the processes that are currently used at your school for selecting apps. And just type a quick note in the chat window to let us know what are some of the ways that you go about selecting apps at this point in time for use in the classrooms at your school. And Ernie, maybe you can share some of what appears.
I'm looking.
Okay, great.
I don't see any comments just yet. We have a full house,
oh, okay.
But no one's typing.
Does this mean that you don't have a process? Maybe?
Oh, wait, here we go. Faculty choose age-appropriate apps. That's from Jeff, who made that comment. So he leaves it up to his staff to figure it out. Any other comments? See, trial and error. Webinar suggestions, conference suggestions, no real process from Julie.
Okay. That's very often the response.
Teachers have used these apps themselves and then submit to IT, who purchases and then installs. Okay, so there's a process there. That's from Grace. Right. Our teachers explain the tie-in to their curriculum and then teach and tech administers reviews and discusses with the teachers. That's from Suzanne. Hello, Suzanne. We're like Jeff. It's up to the teachers. That's Megan. Bill says teachers request them. Jill says, this is brand new for our school, and I usually check online for appropriate apps. Same as Julie. Oops. Hold on. There's a couple more questions here. Same with, we're in the process of exploring apps for the future, planning on going one-to-one by 2014. Our tech team is currently researching. That's from Mary Joy. We're far from choosing apps, still deciding whether or not to use tablets, says Philip. Let's see, Jeff says, we just released our first school-provided iPads, and teachers will submit justification for apps that are not free. That's from Jeff. And then Meg says, we're very new to this, and we're learning the incorporation process. So there's lots of comments there across the board.
Right. And there's and not surprisingly, there's a wide range of experience at this point. Without belaboring the issue, I will suggest to all of you, particularly those of you who are just getting started, if you will if you will think about working with a rubric or a checklist to help not only with educational apps, but even with the productivity apps, you will find that the process is much more effective. And you will find that you make much better choices about the apps that end up being used. It's important to remember that apps are developed by people who often have no background in education at all. And so often you'll find that the pedagogy underlying the way the app operates is ineffective or poorly designed. And you just really do need to take time, whether it's a free app or it's a paid app, you really need to take that time to make sure that you're giving your kids the best possible experience. We're going to move on now, and I'm going to talk a little bit about content creation. And this, for those of you who are just thinking about how you might put this all together, this may change your thinking a little bit. One of the things that really concerned me about the whole idea of tablets initially was a lot of folks are and have thought of them as a one-to-one kind of device. And my own personal thinking is that if you're going to go one-to-one with tablets, it's probably more appropriate with younger students than it is with older students. I do a lot of work with kids pre-K through the grade 12, and what I see pretty consistently is that by the time they're hitting upper elementary grades, middle school, high school, they're wanting more than a tablet. And there's some justification for that. Tablets are wonderful devices. They let you do things you could not do as easily or possibly could not do at all prior to their development, but they are not replacements for laptops. They never were intended to be. And so this is where when kids start getting into middle and high school and they're having to do a lot more writing, many of them do not want to be using a virtual keyboard in order to make that happen. Or their parents are balking at investing another $100 or so for a decent Bluetooth keyboard. So what I'm going to suggest to you, and what I have seen over and over and over again, is that tablets are really remarkable devices for helping students create content and for enabling them to spend more time working at the higher levels of Bloom's revised taxonomy. And there are several reasons for that, primarily the fact that they mostly now have the dual cameras, so they have the capability of taking still shots and recording video, and they have built-in microphones that allow them to record audio. So I'm going to talk with you about some ways that tablets can be used with students to create content with little or no expense, and ways that students can be working. What I found is in high school and middle school you can get about 2 or 3 kids per device. Younger kids you can go up to 4, so you can have groups of 2 to 4. But they work very well together, and they end up working on a variety not only of thinking skills, but also skills like how to work together collaboratively, how to manage a project, that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and get started. The first idea that I'm going to present to you is the idea of using photos and video with the students. This uses the pre-installed camera app, which is free because it's already there. The students can take still photos or video, and they can edit the video either right on the tablet, or it can be transferred to a computer and it can be edited there. So the icons that I have at the bottom show you camera, which is pre-installed, iMovie, which is $4.99 if you have it on an iPad, or VidTrim, which is free if you have it on an Android tablet. I will say that what I've discovered is that over time people decide they really do prefer, if they're going to edit at all, they prefer editing video on a computer rather than on the tablet, just because it's really difficult to see. And if you transfer it to a computer, there are plenty of free editing programs on both the iOS or the Mac and the PC side, so that you really don't have to be worrying about putting out money for video editing software. And here are a few ideas that I've used with kids all over the world, and they work really well. One idea is called a 5-photo story. And in a 5-photo story, the idea of which comes from a group that's on the Flickr.com website, what the students do is they come up with a story that has a sequence of events that can be shown in 5 individual photographs. No text can be used in the photos at all. Ancillary text, if it actually has nothing to do with the story, is okay, but they can't use signs or cartoon dialogue bubbles to explain to the viewer what it is they're trying to get across. And they then, once they've created their stories, they can share them with one another, and then you can do whatever you want with it. You can have them go ahead and write text for the story. You can have them simply discuss the idea that's being presented. And there's a wide range of possibilities. For example, in science, teachers often have the students show the water cycle in a 5-photo story, or metamorphosis in a 5-photo story. In math, I've had teachers put together with their students 5-photo stories about the order of operations. Had an English teacher at the middle school level who had her students who were reading Flowers for Algernon do a chapter summary of each chapter in a 5-photo story. So it crosses all content areas and all grade levels. Photo essays are another possibility, where it's not perhaps as stringent as the 5-photo story. You can actually have more photos. You can actually include text and captions and that sort of thing. Another really effective use of video in the classroom is for the teacher to make videos, or for the students to work with the teacher to make videos modeling desirable behaviors, and then posting those videos on the class website for ongoing reference. And that can be anything from, this is how we line up, and this is how we put things away, and this is how we behave in certain ways in the classroom with younger students, to I've had middle school and high school teachers make videos of, this is how you put a heading on a paper. This is how you call to report an absence. So it can be a variety of different kinds of things. The second type of content creation that is really effective is the use of the built-in microphone, which allows you to create podcasts, and it also allows you to use the voice-to-text capability of tablets. Listening and speaking are 2 of the 4 pillars of language arts, and yet we spend virtually all our time with reading and writing and very little time on listening and speaking. And you can use a free app like iTalk on the iOS side, or Voice Recorder, which is also free and is an Android app. And you can work with students to not only record podcasts for them to listen to, but also have them script and record their own podcasts for consumption among their classmates or outside the classroom. And it's an excellent way to engage students in a process that begins with brainstorming their ideas and then working all the way through scripting, recording, making minor edits, or if you keep it 3 to 5 minutes, maybe just having them re-record again if they're not happy with their product. But it's very simple, and yet it again crosses all grade levels and crosses all content areas. I do want to mention also the voice-to-text capability. If you're using any Android device or an iPad 3 or later, any app that will accept text will allow you to dictate rather than type what you'd like the text to be. And this can be a very valuable capability for a variety of different classroom purposes. If you're using an iPad 1 or 2, you can use voice-to-text, but in that case, with the earlier tablets, you do need to use the free Dragon Dictation app. It's a little bit more clunky, but it actually will work for voice-to-text dictation. These examples can be used to improve reading fluency. They can be used for sharing news, for dictating lab notes. There's just all kinds of different ways that you can use the audio capabilities of the tablets to really help your students strengthen their critical skills in listening and speaking. And then the final area that I want to mention today in content creation is the use of QR codes, and then for iPads only the capability of screencasting. But let's start with QR codes. They're really simple to generate. You need a generator that usually is used on a laptop to make the original QR code. And then you need to have a QR code scanner on your portable device. And iNigma is the scanner that I recommend because it is cross-platform and it's very stable and reliable. And I've found of all the different QR code scanners I've tried using with kids, they enjoy the most success with iNigma. On the left of the slide, I have 3 generators that I commonly recommend. QR Stuff, which just lets you make QR codes out of a whole list of different things, starting with web addresses and working through YouTube videos. QR Voice, which allows you to type a very short text message that then when the QR code is scanned, actually it's played back as a voice message. And then finally, the bottom icon there is for a tool called QR Treasure Hunt, which allows you to set up treasure hunts using clues and QR codes. But this can be a very interesting way to capture students' attention and to get them thinking about things in a different way. Screencasting, unfortunately, is still only available at this point in time on iPads. There is a way, if you do the equivalent of jailbreaking an Android, to screencast using an Android, but I would not recommend that you do that because it does violate your warranty. But for those of you who have iPads, there are 3 really good free screencasting apps. ScreenChomp is one of them. Then there's also Show Me and EduCreation. And what those allow you to do is those allow you to have a whiteboard on your iPad that enables you to record whatever you draw on that whiteboard or whatever images you import to that whiteboard, also any audio. So you can narrate what it is you're drawing or talking about the image. If you bring in an image, you can record that video and then make it available to your students. And we'll talk about some of the ways that this can be very useful in the classroom. Going back first to the QR codes, well, actually, it would work for QR codes or it would work for screencasting. Either of these make it possible for you to expand or enhance the content that you're covering with students. So they're reading about volcanoes. You have them quickly scan a QR code that takes them to a website about volcanoes, or perhaps you have them go to a screencast that you've created that talks more about volcanoes and maybe even incorporates a little video of an eruption of a volcano. You can do book reviews, record them in a variety of different ways, and then link them actually to a book through the use of a QR code that's affixed to the back of it. And then student-created tutorials with screencasting. It's a great diagnostic tool. If you have students create a screencast explaining how to do something, you can watch it then later on, and you can see how well they actually grasp the content that they're explaining. And it just, I find, is an excellent tool for monitoring how well students understand a particular concept. So of the types of content creation that I've just talked about, very quickly, which would be most interesting to you to pursue? Go ahead and type your response into the chat window, and then we'll do some Q&A.
Okay, while we're doing that, Grace wanted to know what's the app when you were talking about the 5 photo series? Was it Flickr?
Oh, no. The app that you use for that, the way we do the 5 photo stories is you just use the camera app. That's
The camera app.
Yep, built in on the tablet, and then you put the 5 photos into an album on within your photo gallery, and you can put them in whatever order you want, and then you can have just a little slideshow right on your tablet. You could also transfer those photos onto a computer and then drop them onto PowerPoint slides or any kind of slideshow software and display them that way.
Okay, there's your answer, Grace. Let's see, Teresa said that she's tried Edu-Creations, and she really liked it. I'm not familiar with that one myself. And Jeff wants a little tip. He's not really understanding screencasting. If you could give him a little more background on how that works.
Sure. So one of the common things, for example, Jeff, with screencasting is teachers will often use it to explain to students how to solve a math problem. So they'll open the screencasting app, which gives them a whiteboard. They then are able to actually write on the iPad screen with their finger or with a stylus, and they can write the math problem that they want the students to solve, or they want to explain how to solve. And then they can go ahead and work the problem, but as they're working the problem, they're recording everything that they say and they do, so that at the end of the time when they've solved the problem, they now have a short video clip that students can watch. They can see everything the teacher did as he or she was solving the problem, and they can hear everything that the teacher said, as long as the teacher remembers to think out loud. So it's a way to capture what's happening on the iPad, and what's happening on the iPad is what's being drawn with the use of a finger or a stylus. Does that help explain it better?
It's also similar to like some of the popular whiteboard solutions where you could capture what you're doing on the whiteboard and save it into a video clip. Instead of using the video camera, it's just capturing the screen. Let's see, Mega has a question or comment. Very interested in Screenchomp and student-created tutorials. She loves this idea. Let's see, Meg also says she uses Edu-Creation and Show Me regularly in the classroom. Show Me, I don't know.
Yeah, Show Me is another popular free screencasting app. The thing that Screenchomp has over the other two is it makes it very easy for you to download your finished product as an MP4 file. And once you've got it as an MP4 file, you can do whatever you want with it. Edu-Creations and Show Me do not support that capability at this time.
Okay. Let's see, Mary Joy says, I like the idea of the QR codes and the screencasting because it addresses many of the learning modalities, which is very true. It does bring in some other aspects into the classroom. And Jeff said, is there an app? Is there an app? I'm not sure what that is referring to. That's all he said. Is there an app? Maybe he's talking about the screencasting comment he made earlier.
I would say Screenchomp is my favorite.
Yeah, Screenchomp is Susan's favorite. Let's see, Jill has a comment. I like the 5 photo story app. It sounds like something I could use in my middle school history class. The QR codes sound fun, but it also sounds very difficult. Actually, it's not, Jill, at all. I'd love to find more information about how to use that in the classroom. I know that Google Chrome browser has you actually right-click on any web screen and it creates an instant QR code. It's very simple to do QR codes. Teresa says, can we say screencasting is like what Khan Academy does?
hopefully it's better than what Khan Academy does, because
Come on now,
you're
Susan.
actually tailoring it for your students,
Okay,
really
good save.
meeting their needs. Yeah.
And then Meg also says the presentation is cutting in and out. Is anyone else having this problem? I've heard that from two people, that the audio is going in and out. Susan is coming to us from an island up in the northwest, so maybe it's her internet connection. She's been pretty consistent with me though. But why don't we move on? Those are all the questions for now on this questionnaire here, Susan.
Okay. Well, I think actually we're at the close of what I had planned to present today. And so if you wanted to take a couple of other questions, Ernie, I'd be happy to answer them, or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, let's do that right now. If there's other questions, let's put that in the questionnaire, Barbie. And before you let you guys log off, there's a couple things I wanted to do. First of all, Susan, I wanted to point out something you said. I want to make sure it doesn't get lost in the discussion here. You feel, with your experience, that a one-to-one iPad or tablet environment is most appropriate for lower education. So you're saying like kindergarten through second, third, fourth grade?
K2, pre-K2.
Okay.
And actually, even then, you don't have to have one-to-one.
Okay. And then so give me if you were advising someone, lower elementary, upper elementary, middle, high school, what do you think is the perfect combination of tablets, and how much should they budget for apps? Is there going to be a variance from elementary to middle to high school on the app potential they should be looking at?
You know, they really, as I said, I really think that the ideal situation in most classrooms is having access to somewhere between 4 and 6 tablets per classroom, if possible.
Mm-hmm.
There are an awful lot of free apps that are perfectly fine to use with kids. Most apps run anywhere from 99 cents to $10, the apps that teachers want to use. It gets really difficult because to sit down and really figure out a budget without knowing people's individual needs, because you have to pay for every app that you install on every tablet. So if you've got 6 tablets, you need to pay for that app 6 times. And there is an education volume pricing program, and that program can, if you're purchasing at least 20 copies of an app, can result in discounts, but those discounts range from 10 to 50% depending upon the who produces the app. Mm-hmm. So there are an awful lot of variables, and you just really need to sit down and have a good idea of the kinds of apps that you're thinking about using, and whether or not you're going to participate in the volume pricing program.
Right.
So it's a more difficult question.
As I switch back over to my screen, Susan, Mary Joy had a question. Is there an app that will both read and create QR codes for the iPad? Are you familiar with anything like that?
You know, I have started to see a few things that say that you can use a laptop camera, or that you can use a camera on an iPad to create the QR code right on the iPad. But it's one of those times where it's really difficult to do that and then figure out what you're going to do with it once you've created it on the iPad, because you've got to get it onto something else in order to scan it.
Right. Also, I think, Mary Joy, that usually the QR code readers are also barcode scanners. So I think they usually are combined into the same app. Anyway, we only have a couple minutes left here, and I don't see any other questions that are coming through at this point. But Susan, thank you so much. I did want to show you a couple extra resources that we have available for you. I will be sending a follow-up email with a link to the recording of this presentation here. There is another webinar that we've developed on technology planning, because a lot of people are talking about one-to-one, bring your own device, blended learning, and a lot of these concepts you need to stop, hold on, wait, before you jump into especially these one-to-one environments, which as Susan just mentioned, maybe isn't the best option for you, you need a plan. And that's one of the strengths that we provide, is helping you put together a 2 to 4 year timeline on how your teachers get prepared, how your infrastructure gets prepared, your curriculum, your students for these devices, because you don't want to just drop them in your school without being prepared. And the planning of that is very important. We can help you with that. Now, Susan has developed a course for iPad and tablet training for teachers. I'm going to send you a link to some information on that. If it's something you're interested in, we are accepting and scheduling that now for the summer and this coming school year. And then obviously we curate, we provide lots of information on K-12 technology integration. Feel free to subscribe to our K-12 Daily Dose daily newsletter, or join our Facebook page. And we do appreciate your time. And Susan, thank you once again. I know you're freezing up there in the Northwest. I hope it starts warming up for you. And it's always a pleasure to hear you. Your words are like gold. We appreciate you, and we thank you for your time.
Well, and thank you for having me, Ernie, and thanks everybody for attending. I really appreciate your time as well.
Great. We hit the 45-minute mark. I think we can leave now. Thank you, folks. We appreciate your time. Please keep an eye out. We're going to send you a questionnaire right now for more information. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.